Take my hand, take my whole world too. Sunderland are off to the Premier League. This is not the Top 20 podcast's snap reaction. We are standing in the shadow of the arch of Wembley, right towards the bottom of the steps of Wembley Way, where the Sunderland fans are streaming out of the ground. They have done it from behind in the playoff final, a championship playoff final, George, with 3 goals in 90 minutes. Can you believe it? How do we begin to sift our way through this one?
Loads of talking points, aren't there? I mean, firstly, I think we have to look at Sunderland and give them immense credit, like to navigate their way through the playoffs as they have done after coming into them in such poor form, to deliver a display today which, let's be frank, it was moments for Sunderland. Yep. It was by no means a 90 minutes performance. It was 2 massive saves, in particular one from Patterson at really important moments. It was a VAR decision that went their way, and it was 2 clinical finishes. Mayenda's finish for the equaliser was obviously very good. I think Jermaine Defoe watching the stands would have been proud of that one. But for Tommy Watson, with what must have been his last kick for the club before moving on to Brighton in the summer, with a goal that gets better with every time you see it, and we were lucky enough to have access to the Sky Sports footage in our seat, and we saw the reverse angle where it's a ball that is caressed. Like, to have that kind of poise and composure in that moment, where
It's somehow deft, even though it's from range.
But it was really obvious. Anyone who's seen Tommy Watson play knew that him getting the ball in that kind of space, he was always going to get a shot off, and he knew that. And he took kind of 2 touches to get the ball set and out of his feet, and to, rather than do what Job did about 2 minutes before and just lash it over the bar, to show the composure and the level head, just to start the ball outside the right hand post. And when you see the dive, basically put it in the only part of the goal where it could have gone to score. Like, an incredible moment. So let's focus on Sunderland now before we do the post-mortem on Blade.
An amazing parting gift from Watson, a player who didn't start the season in Sunderland's team, found his way into the side after an initial Mundell injury and sparkled before picking up an injury of his own and then missing the majority of the end of the season as well. During that time, a move to Brighton is announced, which was kind of tough to take for some of the fans, I think, who felt, hold on, you haven't done that much yet in a Sunderland shirt. We're giving you the opportunity to prove yourself at senior level, and you're leaving straight away, and that all evaporates. Surely now, with what is one of the most iconic goals in Sunderland history from such a young player, the Jack Clarke regen that we'd heard about in the academy for a year or 2 before we ever saw him in the flesh, does like something better than Jack Clarke probably ever did for Sunderland.
Definitely more important.
That's, I think, one of the places to start when I want to talk about Sunderland is this insane commitment to youth and to young players, and not just buying young players but promoting young players from within as well, where even if you go to Tri-Hume and Sirkin, the fullbacks, even Ballard at centre-back, these were players who didn't have any senior football experience at any other clubs that Sunderland brought to the club to develop into first-team players, senior first-team players, as they all are now, even though they're all in their early to mid-20s. But of course, Chris Rick, how many minutes has he played at this age? An unbelievable amount. And how many other clubs would have just chucked him in and kept him in? Joe Bellingham signed as a 16, 17-year-old, now 19, 2 full seasons under his belt. Put in the team, kept in the team, stayed in the team. And Watson as well is another example from the academy, given an opportunity. And at the same time, George, they've been signing players. They've been signing players from all over Europe, and some of them, like Mayenda, scorer of a crucial equaliser, and what a finish as well, but also Isidore, but also Lefay, and other players that have rounded out this squad. They really have built a squad with like a pretty mad approach, and it's taken them to the Premier League, where a lot of people would have said, you know what, if you're Sunderland in the EFL, just buy proven EFL players to get yourself to the Premier League and then do some funky stuff. They said, no thanks, we'll do this our way.
It's really interesting because they've come from League One to the Premier League now, and normally when you do that, there's kind of a dominance associated with it, but Sunderland done it twice through the playoffs, and that, I guess, means that when you compare them to other clubs who've gone in the past, it hasn't been necessarily where they've built the best team in the Championship, but what they've done, I think, means that under Christian Speakman, their recruitment policy has to be one of the best out there, where yes, it's Sunderland, and yes, their fans will feel like this return to the Premier League is long overdue, but they haven't spent very much money to get there. Mm-hmm. The players that they've signed who've starred have been players who've built a reputation at Sunderland rather than players who they've gone out and signed with a reputation, apart from Lefay, obviously, who's a bit of a case unto himself because of his relationship with the manager. And that to build a team effectively of kids who they brought potential rather than proven talent, and morphed it into a side capable of going up through the playoffs. And also, you can argue that their points tally this season isn't really a fair reflection of the team that they were, because the last 6 weeks or so were frankly irrelevant in terms of results. So I think when we're talking about, and there's always talk about who's the next Brentford and who's the next Brighton. They've done it a very different way. But if we're looking at the most innovative teams in terms of the way that they recruit and the way that they operate, alongside pretty immediate success, then you've got to say that Sunderland are that side at the moment.
And they had a massive wobble last season, and that
wasn't a wobble. I think
that wasn't to do with player recruitment.
Fell over.
That was managerial recruitment, where they got themselves in a right mess with Tony Mowbray being sacked when the team just objectively were doing pretty well. The appointment of Mick Beale, disastrous. The fact that they then binned him off and just finished the season for 3 months with no one really in charge, or no one senior grabbing the club by the scruff of his neck. It felt like pretty disastrous, I must admit, and I was incredibly critical of the way they managed that, partly because I felt with the young players that they had, you can't just sack off like 3 or 4 months of competitive football. What does that do for their development? It turns out all of that was kind of rubbish, because they appointed Régis Lebris, George, a manager that had just been relegated by Lorient in Ligue 1, having done admittedly a sensational job the season before. And that in itself is another piece of essentially brave. Like, what they've done is just brave, because they have appointed managers and they have signed players that I think a lot of clubs around this sort of level would be like, yeah, we'd love to do that, but it doesn't quite work like that. For somehow this season, from the opening day of the season, it just worked straight away, with Lebris being the perfect man for this squad.
Yeah, and I'd almost say normally when we leave a playoff final, certainly the case last season with Southampton, the job of getting a team out of the Championship and then staying up in the Premier League is very different. And Russell Martin never really felt like it was the right fit. I think in Lebris, it's kind of the perfect profile for a club trying to stay up in the Premier League, because Sunderland have developed over the course of the season and are at their best a team who don't necessarily want to have the ball, who are very good at defending in a compact shape, who attack best in transition. And it was interesting, we said at the beginning of the show, it wasn't a great performance from Sunderland over 90 minutes. They dominated possession because game state dictated that they would, and for the most part they were poor in possession. Like, they created next to nothing from kind of slow build-up play and trying to find routes to kind of pick the lock of Sheffield United. Both goals came from moments where they were able to win the ball back in dangerous areas and spring very quickly and score the goal. So I think there's a lot of work to be done. Obviously, because of the young squad, it means that their players will develop probably more than you see most teams' player development over the course of the season. But they'll bring in a lot of key players. But I think in Lebris, you've got a manager who the game plan and the blueprint to pick up points, I think, will fit a team who go into the Premier League and will have a deficiency in terms of technical quality in most games. And maybe they stand a better chance of achieving something despite a relatively paltry points tally for a promoted side.
It ends an 8-year stay in the EFL. Sunderland, realistically,
terrible news for us,
weren't meant to be in the EFL for 8 years, but it doesn't work like that, and that's why we love this league system, this pyramid system. It's why we love the EFL. Not only did they come down from the Premier League, they were relegated back to back. They spent a few years in League One. They did not get that right for quite a long time, and then they came up to the Championship, and they have just had. And you might say it's because of the nature of the fan base, that when things are going well, the momentum that a club like this can deliver, maybe that's what launched them into the top 6 in that first season under Mowbray. And then after the wobble, they were able to go again. There's so many different factors here, and everyone will have their different opinion as to exactly how much of it is the most important part of it. But to recover over what has been an extended period of time from demotion from the Premier League, having had just a horrendous... How long was the horrendous period for Sunderland? 10 years? Almost 10 seasons if you encapsulate League One, 3 years, the decline of the Premier League era. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing to sit and watch those fans, as we did, sing, "Baby, I'm ready to go" at full time. And then Wise Men Say, not long after the trophy lift, genuine goosebumps, because they are, as all EFL fans are, a very, very passionate fan base. There are a lot of them, and it is impossible every single time we come to a playoff final not to sit and watch the celebrations, let them soak over you, and enjoy them for what they are.
Word for Luco 9.
Oh,
the player with the least impact on the...
A tear for Luke 09.
I mean, for 09, who was visibly very pumped before, we had the lucky seats kind of right in the front row, and he was pretty emotional before the game started, and within a minute and a half he jumped for a header with Kiefer Moore, who won the aerial duel, and Patterson made the save, and in doing so he seemingly popped his shoulder out, and there was a long delay, and at one point it looked really nasty. We kind of walked off the pitch and suddenly it felt like we couldn't really see what happened, but it looked like he was in a pretty bad way.
Bit of oxygen getting taken on board, some wobbly legs.
And we were close to the Sunderland bench, so we saw him visibly distressed during the first half, and then running up the touchline for both goals with his arm in a sling. Today will be remembered in part by the image of him in a sling, which is ridiculous because he only played a minute and a half in the game, and all he did was, be done by Kiefer Moore in the air, which is no surprise given their size difference. But I think he was. It's amazing to think of him as that fresh-faced, wide-eyed kid in Sunderland Till I Die on Netflix, when he was everyone's favourite character at a time where the club were still, right at the end of that period where they were being run pretty poorly. We saw what happened in the seasons after that in terms of the way the wage bill was cut, and they came back to the Championship in a much better state than when they came down, and that's a lesson to a lot of teams who get relegated out of the Championship, especially big teams, that actually hitting your nadir can be a good thing in terms of the rebuild and working out how to operate best. But he was part of that, and he's been part of this team ever since, and even though what would have been perfect is kind of had he played on with a shoulder hanging off and managed to oversee it, but there's almost something kind of about that image of him, the warrior, who's been there the whole time, celebrating, and he kind of encapsulates what Sunderland have been all about for the last 8 years.
Time to mention Anthony Patterson, because wow, I mean, an incredible save after a minute from that Kiefer Moore header. Luke 09 ended up popping his shoulder there. I think I'd have definitely dislocated my shoulder trying to make a save like that, one-handed, right in the corner, pushed away when he'd barely had time to warm up. The game was a huge moment. And, nothing really he could have done about the goal that Sheffield United scored. He then, is involved in the VAR incident where he's impeded by Vinicius Souza, who's standing in an offside position. The general consensus of the people around us is that Patterson maybe wouldn't have saved it anyway, but I'm afraid in matters like this, it's irrelevant. What's not irrelevant, George, is that there was VAR and it had a big say in the game. So as people who instinctively don't like it and don't want to see it, let's say, in the regular season in the Championship, how do we get our heads around the fact that it made a decision that was not wrong, but in a way that left us feeling a little hollow, or somehow it wasn't quite right?
I hate VAR. I hate its existence totally. I think it shouldn't be used in the playoff finals when there hasn't been a VAR over the course of the whole season. I'd be interested to know what Chris Wilder's going to say in his post-match, because obviously we're doing this just after the whistle, so we don't know. I think today's probably quite a good day for VAR backers, because this was an immensely important occasion, and realistically, had VAR not been used, then I think Sunderland fans... I mean, it's one of those decisions where...
Do you think that's the one that you get really upset about?
No,
I actually think this
don't.
is one of the rare ones where you'd be like...
I don't at all. Yeah. But at the same time, when you step back, and I don't think it should be included. I don't like the fact that it was overturned, but you can't deny that, by the letter of the law, it was enforced, and therefore the right decision was made. So my issue isn't so much with the decision itself, it's just a frustration that it exists. But, today, when the stakes are really high, Sunderland were saved and justice was done about a decision that ended up probably turning the tie.
And so few chances that they had in the game, which just speaks to how well taken both goals were. Mayenda going high and into the near post, where, to mention Jermaine Defoe, he'd have definitely gone hard and low into the far corner. That's what a lot of strikers would do. Just lifted it with power into the near post. That is so difficult for a keeper to save, and it always needs to be quite special to beat Michael Cooper. And then, of course, the Watson goal that we've already discussed. But Patterson also made a huge save in the second half at 1-0 from Brooks. It was followed up with an amazing block from Dan Ballard. There are, in any game like this, always individual moments that you look back on and you say, well, that kept it at 1-0. That laid the platform for what came afterwards. And Patterson deserves a ton of credit because he's someone, like a lot of the Sunderland players, when you have a season like they did, you get everyone's expectations up through your own brilliant performance, and then for an extended period of time, you're playing beneath expectations. Questions start to be asked. Who's not quite good enough? Oh, if we do go up through the playoffs, who should we be looking to replace? And I reckon if you're Patterson, you saw all that. You're a local lad through the academy. That would have hurt, that would have stung. And in these playoffs, he has absolutely stood up and been counted, and is a major factor why they're playing Premier League next season.
Yeah, I think obviously the save from the Moore header was possibly the better save of the two. I mean, they were both very good, but they still went 1-0 down after that. You don't know how much the game turned on that moment, if at all. Whereas the save from Brooks came at a time, it was shortly before the equaliser. It would have put Blaze 2-0 up with 20 minutes to go in the game. You have to expect they probably would have gone on to see the game out had they done so. And Brooks, I'd say, did everything right. I don't think you could fault what he did. He sent the keeper the wrong way. And it's just a great save with his feet from Patterson, and then an amazing block from Ballard. And that's the thing about this playoff final, is that every single marginal moment effectively went Sunderland's way. Mm-hmm. Whether it was the save from Patterson to keep it 0-0, whether it was the VAR decision, the save on the block, and then the two sumptuous finishes, all just at moments which could have... there were so many occasions during the game at 0-0 or 1-0 that would have seen Sheffield United make it relatively cosy, and they couldn't quite do that. And so long as it was 1-0, the game was always going to be, Sunderland were able to turn it around, and that's exactly what they did.
Sheffield United, the third best team in the league, absolutely no doubt. Coasted through the playoff semi-finals, went 1-0 up here, comfortably the better side. At 70 minutes, I turned to James, who we were with, and I said, look, they've been winning games all season by managing them well when they need to, by winning tight games, by being smart about it. And there are a few levers that you can pull to see games out. Obviously, brilliant finishes from the opposition. There's not so much you can do about that, but you don't give the ball away in dangerous areas. You don't allow yourself to be opened up in the way that they were for Roberts to play the ball through for Mayenda, as brilliant as that pass was and as good as the movement was. And you certainly, I'm afraid, don't give the ball away, as Kiefer Moore did in the build-up to the goal that Watson scored to win it. However, Blaze fans probably won't be feeling like this, but the way you just summed it up about if you take 6 or 7 massive but marginal moments that could feasibly in any football match go either way, they swung in Sunderland's favour. And I think to a certain extent, in a low-scoring sport where there's not too much between two teams, sometimes that is just the main factor in the result. And we've just spoken to some Sheffield United fans, and they weren't complaining about VAR, they weren't complaining about the goals. They were questioning Wilder's substitutions. Should Harmer have come off? Well, he looks pretty injured to me. Brereton Diaz cameo was frankly a disaster. He comes on, gets booked, gets injured, comes off again. By the time that Ahmed Hodzic goes down, to what extent can you vouch for injury?
And that's another marginal moment again, where both teams had a moment where a player was off injured for quite a long period of time, and they were down to 10 men. When it happened in the first half, Sunderland fans were not happy, but Sheffield United failed to capitalise on it. When it happened to Sheffield United, a chance comes basically with a massive gap in the middle of Sunderland's of Sheffield United's defence. Well done. And they capitalise on it and they score. And that's going to be another frustration, isn't it? Of course it is for Blades fans. I mean, I'm sure Chris Wilder will think that he set his team up to be able to have been home and dry in this game by the time that Sunderland equalised. And I think it's really hard to argue with that. I know there'll be Sunderland fans watch this, listening to this, but thinking we're not giving them enough credit. But you just have to think that in terms of possession and territory, sure. But until the Mayenda goal, Sunderland didn't create or fashion a decent goal-scoring opportunity at all. And you could argue that was their only one, because even the goal that came later on was a shot from range. And I think from a manager's perspective, if you do that and you restrict your opposition to very little, then you're doing your job relatively well. And I'm sure that Wilder will probably point the finger at his players rather than himself, which maybe not be a surprise anyway. But I think there's probably justification to that too.
What do we think big picture for Sheffield United? Obviously, they do not join the other Leeds and Burnley in the Premier League. It means that only one of the teams that came down last season goes back up in the form of Burnley, with Luton dropping all the way out of the league altogether. So from a sort of championship balance point of view, Sheffield United, we lose a team in Sunderland who didn't have any parachute payments, and Sheffield United stay down, which automatically puts them in a very strong position. They already have a very good squad. It was put together pretty swiftly in both the summer and then of course in the January window, so you'd hope that maybe with things a bit more settled, if they are, with new ownership in place, if Wilder gets the backing and if there's a team in place to help him build squad, that they should be able to get things done in a slightly calmer fashion and pick 3 or 4 nailed-on improvements rather than basically rebuild the whole squad, which is what they had to do and which they did very, very well. Where do you think this leaves them heading into next season?
It's going to be interesting to see how they approach the summer, because obviously there was a lot of uncertainty this time last year about Wilder's future because of the takeover. Takeover didn't go through until midway through the season. That's now done. So obviously Wilder's stock is, I think, any Blades fans who criticise him for today, when the dust settles, will still look at the job he's done this season as being a positive one, because you have to remember where they came from early in the season. But it's a new ownership group. Will they want him to be the man in charge of them going forward? It wouldn't be a massive surprise to me if the answer is no. So I'd say some uncertainty, but I think they're in a great position. Yeah. We stood here last year. They're not Leeds, and they aren't as good as Leeds were this time last year. But we saw Leeds be defeated in the playoff final, and we knew that they were going to be strong the season afterwards. It feels really. There seems to me to be no reason why Sheffield United won't be at least as good this time next year.
Unless they blow it all up.
Blow up the
the squad, blow up the manager. I'm not saying that they will do that, by the way, but
blow up the manager.
Metaphorically blow up the manager and say, look, new ownership, we want something fresh. I've said a few times I want Chris Wilder to manage Sheffield United until he physically can't manage Sheffield United anymore, because I find it very difficult to believe, and maybe this is heart not head, that someone could represent that club as well as he does, both as a Unitedite, but also as a Blade, but also be a brilliant football manager at this level, proven time and time again. I don't think, I'm sure they could find someone to have success for them, but I think it would be a huge risk to turn away from Wilder. So if he fancies it, I really hope that nothing silly happens.
After the initial jubilation from the Sunderland players and bench, I kind of looked for Wilder, and I can't imagine what he's going through. Like a fan who also, knows and has lived the curse. I'm assuming he's probably been at all 4 Wembley finals before this one as a fan, and not seen them score. To be 10, 15 minutes away from delivering the first playoff win, for delivering that promotion again, getting Sheffield United back to the Premier League for the second time, it's going to really, really hurt. And, for a lot of players as well, Kiefer Moore, who thought he's probably going to put Blades ahead within the first 90 seconds, and then for him to give the ball away that led to the goal, got to really feel for him. It's just, the playoffs are brutal. And actually thinking about it, going 1-0 up, scoring again to make it 2-0, being taken away because of VAR, and conceding once with kind of 10-15 minutes to go, having just had a big chance, then again in injury time, and then not even creating anything after that. I can't really think of a worse way to lose a playoff final.
I wonder what it would take for you to start believing in curses, because this has got to be, this is pushing me pretty close to the brink, I'll be honest. A horror way to lose. They had the game in their hands, quite frankly, and they let it slip. But that's because of 2 incredible moments for Sunderland, and it's an incredible day for Sunderland. They're promoted to the Premier League. We wave goodbye to them on the top 20. We are going to miss them.
Big fan base who listened. Can you keep listening?
It's been a real roller coaster, I think it's fair to say.
Come a long way since touches in the box gate in under Jack Ross, when I didn't make myself very popular with Sunderland fans, but I feel like we're now mates. So.
We have. Yeah, and if we self-reflect for a moment, this is our coming up to our 9th year now doing the pod. We absolutely love and feel so lucky to be at playoff finals, and hopefully we're able to tell the story both on the pitch and give you some experience as well. We tried something new with the pod today, recording it outside the ground, hopefully with a little bit of atmosphere. I hope that's been all right from an audio perspective. We just wanted to try something different. We're slightly inspired by Dortmund away last summer with the England pod. So let us know if you like this sort of thing. We're on YouTube as well, so you can watch the video there. We're always looking for new ways to do things, as we've been doing this for so long now, and we need to keep it fresh. So all being well, we'll do the same for the League One playoff final on Sunday, the same for the League Two playoff final on Monday. So please do let us know if you've enjoyed the background noise, essentially. We've been so lucky to have witnessed a genuinely entertaining Championship playoff final. That in and of itself is exciting to say. 3 goals, a turnaround win for Sunderland, and we wave goodbye to them as they reach the Premier League. So thank you so much for listening. If you're watching on YouTube, please make sure you subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment with your thoughts on the game. Thank you, and go well.